to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is the place where you get both a coach's and sports dietitian perspective on topics important to endurance sports, including nutrition, training, and how these impact and fit into your daily life both on and off the race course. Your host, Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome to episode 13 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm along here with Coach Katie. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I'm going to title it as "The Mind is Willing, but the Body is Not Able." And so the idea behind this came to me as I was thinking through the development of training plans. When a coach sits down to create what we would call an optimal training plan, but not all athletes are able to execute an optimal training plan. You know, if you're approaching it from a triathlon perspective, there's 3 disciplines that we have to master, along with the fourth one, which I would consider to be like nutrition, would be kind of the fourth discipline, and then a 5th discipline of recovery. But the 3 primary ones that we have to get through are swim, bike, and run. And there's particular volumes that we would like to get through in order to be prepared on race day. So the question becomes, how can we create a plan that is optimal for that athlete, but may not follow like a typical optimal template that we would really like to? Maybe this athlete has particular limitations, whether that is they have previous injury histories, which would prohibit them from really stacking on the volume, or you could have time constraints where they have really busy schedules or they travel a lot. And so or they're on like shift work, and so they have these abnormal work schedules. So these particular athletes can't follow what we would consider to be a optimal training plan. So how do we make these adjustments? Before I get too deep into this, let's do a little banter back and forth. So Katie, I want to bring you in, see how you're doing and how you're surviving the heat out there in Colorado. So what's going on?
I'm doing pretty well. I did do a track workout this morning. That was when I came home afterwards, it was already almost 90. So I'm assuming it must have been already in the 80s when I did this workout, and I felt it. I was like, this is really hard. I needed like a longer recovery I was doing 400 because I'm training for a mile race, which is a little atypical of what I do, but I've been training more for speed. And the 400s, it just like started out good and then kind of got worse. And I had to take longer recoveries. I have like ice water I'm pouring on myself and drinking, and it was tough. But I did get to go trail running this Saturday. I got the chance to go up to Steamboat in the mountains and do a nice 14-mile trail run, which was sublime and awesome. And I missed the trails. I wish I could do more of them, but it was really wonderful. So that's positive. And it was cooler up there, so I didn't have so much of the heat. I got to escape it a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's always nice when you get to kind of get up on the trails, and the Colorado is beautiful for that. So, so I'm doing pretty good. Back to a busy week, but that's okay.
Awesome.
How are you? Any updates? How's your training? And tell me, update everyone on what's going on with the that half Ironman. Did you sign up?
Yes. So yeah, there's been some significant developments. You recall in the last episode of the Coach's Corner, I talked about how Ironman had sent me an email offering me a free registration into any 2025 race in North America that still had spots. And they offered a promo code. So I'm going to make this a really, really quick story. The promo code didn't work. And so I was pinging back and forth with Ironman, trying to figure out, hey, is this going to work? Am I going to be able to meet the deadline? Because there was a time limit that I could accept the offer. And the deadline had passed, and I still hadn't heard back from them. And so I was pretty discouraged. And I was just like, well, maybe it's just not meant to be. And then lo and behold, boom, it hits my email. It's like, oh, we're sorry that the promo code wasn't working. We changed a few settings in the system, so try it now. And then I immediately logged in and I was still getting the same error. And I said, no, still not working. Knowing their history of, this kind of intermittent communication, I wasn't too, I wasn't I was pretty confident that I may not hear back from them. But lo and behold, like 5 minutes later, they reached back out and said, oh, we changed a few more settings. It's working on our end now. So try again. I immediately logged in and boom, I am registered. So we are ready to roll. I am now officially registered for Ironman Florida 70.3 December 14th of this year. And so I'm ready. I can honestly say this was not in my plan whatsoever, not even in the realm of thought that I would attempt a half this year. The Olympic was kind of like my stretch goal. And, the way that my Achilles were feeling at the end of that training cycle, I said, well, I kind of met my stretch goal, and I think I pushed my body right to that edge. And the last 2 weeks of that training cycle wasn't really what I would call optimal, which is kind of the idea behind this podcast episode. And so I said, well, I have a hard time saying no to a free race, and I've done quite a few of them before, so I kind of know what to expect. I've never done Florida. They say that it's a rolling bike course, and to hear the description of the word rolling anywhere in the state of Florida, I'm kind of curious on what they mean by rolling. So I need to take a look at that elevation profile a little bit more.
You're like, yeah, there's hills there.
Yeah, just a couple speed bumps, and I think that's what we're going to call it, rolling. But I take a closer look. But it's a lake swim, and I assume it's probably going to be wetsuit legal, so that should really put a nice test on my shoulders and swim fitness. My bike, I'm not too concerned about. My thing is going to be able to stay aero for that long, staying down into the bike position, especially in Florida, because you can have some wind in that particular area. So I'm kind of curious if I can just stay low and stay small as possible to try and be more efficient and then kind of survive the run. And so the reason that this podcast episode topic came to me is that I've started to develop the bones of my training plan. And I've been chatting about it with my wife a little bit back and forth. And I was like, this is what I'm thinking. And I thought that because my bike fitness is really deep, my swim fitness is getting there. I'm getting stronger, but the shoulders are still a little sensitive. So I thought, well, I don't think I can run as much as optimal that I want to, that I'm not going to have the run volume that I really want to feel confident, but I can ride a lot. So my idea is I'm going to develop a training plan that is bike heavy and a little on the swim heavy side, but mostly biking to really build deeper bike fitness so that will set me up to be able to endure the run. If I'm able to run the whole half marathon, I don't know. It depends on how things hold up, but that's my idea. And so I started thinking about how I was training for this Olympic this year, and I think I was running like 5 days a week. I was biking 5 days a week. I was doing, I think, 3 strength sessions and 2 swim sessions. 2 swim sessions was enough to keep the stress down on my shoulders because I had a 3rd swim session in there, but I found that the additional volume was really stressing them out and I couldn't recover. So I had to adjust that and took away a swim, figuring that I could still get some strength building in the weight room, even though it's not swim specific. But I did very, very purposeful swim workouts. So, I had a particular goal. I didn't just go in there and just swim aimlessly and haphazardly. They were very structured and, there was a purpose behind them. But by the end of that training period, I kind of had to cancel my run workouts because my Achilles were really flared and I was kind of struggling and I didn't want to do more damage so that I could at least show up on race day halfway in a little bit better condition. And I didn't want to dig too deep of a hole. But the performance was such that, I still got on the podium, which I'm still, extremely surprised at, now. So I guess it was enough. So the question becomes, how do I get through a half marathon after riding 56 miles? It's going to be a very different thought process than doing the Olympics. So I said, well, I don't know if my body can handle 5 days a week. So maybe I should only be running 3 and actually remove the long run from the training plan because I know that after a long run, my body is really beat up and my feet and my Achilles are really, really on fire and they're hot. And so I know that the long run it digs too deep of a hole. And I don't need the long run, really. I can do enough moderate runs to where I can still get the volume. I mean, I know what it's like to run a half marathon, and I'm not running it as a pure runner. I'm running it as a triathlete. I think, in my opinion, that's a very different structure, different method for training and for race execution as well. So, when you come to a half marathon and a triathlon, you're not coming in fresh. You're already coming in under fatigue from the swim and the bike. So you can't run it the same way that you would normally run just a standalone half marathon. I was like, well, I just need to maybe limit my swims down to 3 so that my body can absorb it. But then I started thinking, I was like, well, those 3 are going to have some significant volume to them. And I don't know if that's going to be the best situation for me. So I said, well, I'd rather take that volume and spread it out over more runs than doing shorter runs or fewer runs that have to be a little bit longer. So I said, well, I don't think I can do, I don't want to do 5. So I settled on 4 runs. No, actually I do have 5 runs in there, but I removed the long run, which was the hole digger for me. So the way that I'm approaching it is I have 2 moderate runs and 3 short runs. My moderate runs, I should be getting anywhere between 6 to 7 miles in, but I'm doing them twice in the week. The shorter runs, I should get anywhere between 3 to 4 miles in them, but it's going to be under a lot of fatigue from all the bike training that I'm going to be doing. So, it's not optimal. And, clearly I want to be able to say, hey, I did long runs and, to walk into that race feeling confident in, my ability to execute a long run. But what good does it do me to do a bunch of long runs through a 16-week plan if I'm coming into race day really beat up? The Achilles are really on fire and super sensitive, and I'm not going to be able to execute the race no matter how much I trained because my body couldn't absorb it and couldn't recover from the training. So my mind is willing to do the work, but my body is just not able to execute it right now. I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case, but where I am in this moment, I have to develop a plan that I can execute, not try and execute an optimal plan. And so I think that's a really important idea. When you can't execute like the plan that you want, then get a plan that you can execute. And that's one of the things that I do when I talk to my athletes. When I'm sitting down with a new athlete, I want to know, well, how available are you for training? I don't want to give you a plan that you think you can do. I want to give you a plan that you're fairly confident that fits into your life, that you know that you can execute and that you can recover from. Are you always going to be able to recover from it? And is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. Because we want that stress. We want that stress adaptation. But I don't want to give you a plan that is going to add even more stress that you can't absorb. And then you go into race day less optimal than you would be. So in your experience in working with athletes and working with runners, have you ever come across an athlete where you have a volume in mind that you want to give them, but they just can't execute it for whatever reason? So you have to kind of give them a plan that kind of fits them.
Yeah, I would say sometimes it's hard, like, sometimes that is the time piece mostly. Like, I don't have a lot of people with significant injuries, that I'm working with I have people I work with injuries, but they don't necessarily have like a race in mind that they've signed up for. The person I'm thinking about or the people I'm thinking about are maybe trying to get to a point where they are recovering from an injury and they're slowly getting back into running so that they maybe can sign up for something when they're able. But I don't have that specific situation. I think for me, it's more time commitment and what an athlete's able to do the time wise. So I do have people that I wish I could give them more because I know they would benefit from maybe more volume, but they just, because of their life, travel a lot of. I know one person I work with who travels for work, and that's a challenge because when she's traveling, she can't really schedule a lot of running in gym workouts, that kind of thing. So we're kind of managing that schedule. Long runs, she's tired, some days just from her stress of work and other things she's doing. So it's hard because sometimes athletes come in with a specific goal in mind, and like, okay, if there's a little more volume, we could get you there, or a little more running specific training for a half marathon, but maybe the time is the issue. So then it really comes for me to like focusing on what, like you said, kind of like what really matters, like making sure that I'm putting in the workouts that are going to help improve fitness, and emphasizing like the long run for her, because she can do it. She doesn't have that limitation of doing it, but it does become a little bit tricky because if I have an athlete that's coming in and they're like, I want to PR in my half marathon by 5 minutes, but they don't have the time. I think too, sometimes you have to have that conversation of what the expectations are and what the limitations are with their ability to train. And because those don't always match up either. It's like, well, if you want to run this specific race at this time, what you have the time-wise ability to train, like you might not be able to reach that because you do need to get maybe a little more volume, or a little another run day in there. And if you can only run 3 days a week or 4 days a week, that may not get you where you want to go. So I think also like just discussing expectations, and making sure that everything's aligned, because I don't want to take someone on that can only do 2 or 3 or 4 days a week, and they have a really high expectation for their results, because then it's kind of like, I can't pull it out of the hat, make them faster, right? They have to put the work in. Um, I think that's true for myself as well. Like I've never been in that situation where I've had injuries before, but I've never been in a situation where I had signed up for something and an injury was a limitation. In most cases, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to put off a race, or not do something because of this injury. So I've never been in a situation where I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to work through this. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just haven't been in that situation. But for me, it has been a time constraint. And that's always been like the challenge for me is usually how much I want to train versus how much I can. And I can find ways to fit it in. But Justin, you're right. Like if you have other stresses in life and you can't recover from that training, so even if I could do 80 miles a week and still work 40 hours a week or something like that and have my son, I could probably do it, but I'm not going to be able to recover because the stress level is going to be so high. And so, there's a lot of things you have to kind of consider when you're looking at scheduling out a plan. And for me, it's always been, yeah, time is the issue, right? I think that's true for a lot of people. So we can maybe hit I think the injury piece is really important, because that's almost like what you're going to recommend for someone who has like an injury, whether it's preventing them from, running or biking or swimming, versus like time issues are the recommendation there is going to be a little bit different. So why don't we focus on like what happens, what would you do, or do you have athletes and yourself, like what are we considering when somebody's coming in with like an Achilles issue, or like a knee issue, or something they can maybe run through a little bit, but or maybe it's on the bike or something, but they're able to do some of it, but when they do a higher, like you said, like a higher volume day, a long run, it's pushing them over the edge. Like how are you approaching that for an athlete who wants to compete and do something like a half Ironman or a half marathon or something? Like, I'm curious.
Yeah, there's kind of two ways that you can approach it. You can focus on the other disciplines. Like I've opted to focus on, my bike fitness, because, if I'm looking at the calculation for a 70.3, 80% of the miles traversed in a 70.3 are on the bike. So it makes sense to have as much deep bike fitness as you can possibly have, so that when you get off of that bike in T2, you are feeling fairly fresh. You don't feel like you've just ridden hard for 56 miles, because that's going to set you up better to execute a decent run, because there's no such thing as a bad run and a good bike split. What that means is that you overbiked. You didn't have the bike fitness to execute that level of intensity and then be able to run afterwards. So my thought for my training plan for this one is I'm going to bike as much as I can, and I'm going to do different kinds of bikes as well. So, I have a road bike that has clip-on aero bars that I'm going to be using as a race bike, and I also have a gravel bike. So one of the things that I've realized is that my gravel bike is a really, really great tool for building strength on the bike. So I know it's a very different cadence that you're maintaining. It's a very different, I think it's a very different kind of muscle engagement, especially if you're riding hard routes, not just, there's one place that I go to is called High Bridge Trail State Park, and it's an old rail to trail where they pulled up the railroad ties and put in crushed rock, and they've transitioned it into a park and a trail. I'll go out there, and actually that's where I do my long rides right now, and because I think it's setting me up well for Florida, because I think that my legs are going to be spinning a lot more than it would be if I were to go and do something like we had Lake Placid just this past weekend, where there's a lot of hills, up in I think it's in the Adirondacks of New York. It's a very different training style that you have to go through. And so what I want that muscular endurance, of just the legs constantly spinning, because you're going to get no break. And I think I get that a little bit on that kind of trail because it's flat. There's nothing to coast. Because if you coast, you just stop moving. And then on Sundays, I typically go out to places, Kahana State Park, where it is really, really hilly. I'm getting over 1,000 feet of elevation gain just within, less than 20 miles. So it's up and down, and there's a lot of different saddle positions, and I'm trying to, and I'm not coming out of the seat. So it's all seated climbs and, trying to learn this, and it's generated a lot of strength in my legs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it. Even though I would typically tell an athlete, look, if we're going to train on the horse that we're going to race on, so, we want to stay on the bike that you're going to use as much as possible. But I've been riding this bike for over, 8 years. It's a 2014 Specialized Roubaix road bike. So I've had it forever. It's gotten me through every single race. And so, I know how to ride it. So there's nothing new there. And so I'm going to like this a little bit of variety that I'm going to inject in, because I want that kind of adaptation. I want the strength, because I think that that's going to transition well for Florida, for me to be able to generate the power that I need so that my legs can turn. I still get that kind of cadence work either on the trainer or during my long ride, which would be somewhere else. So that's the approach that you can take, is you can just focus on the other two events so that you come out of them and you're ready to run as fresh as you can possibly be, as if you're just jumping up off the couch and you're ready to run. No, it's not. But I'm trying to give you the best opportunity that you can to have a decent run. Then it's going to come down to strategy. How do we want to execute this run? Do we want to say, okay, I just want you to run for as long as you can, and then once you reach that breaking point, you just have to start walking, or whether you're going to execute some kind of run walk protocol from the very beginning, or are you just going to execute that when you can no longer run? There's going to be a lot of conversations on how we want to execute that run
piece. Yeah, that's I think that's where the expectation for the run. Ideally, you would want to be able to do the whole thing running, but in that situation, you might have to have that. It would almost be better, I would think, to do if someone's really not confident they would be able to run that whole 13. Would it be a conversation of, okay, let's do a run walk? Because you might actually, in that situation, be faster than if you were to just run. Because what if you made it only to 7 miles and you're like, I can't? That's a lot. 6 miles of walking is a lot, but if you can spare yourself a little bit and spare that injury a little bit by, maybe 5 on 1, I don't know, whatever you think, whatever you determine with your athlete that is feasible for them, to then take that little load off for a minute can help them maybe do that run walk the entire time. And they are actually doing that run, that 13 miles, much quicker. So I think in that instance, it may be, okay, let's implement some sort of run and then a walk break and then a run and then a walk break. And I think, would be almost better off. That's how I would probably go about that. Most of the time, I think this is a unique situation in triathlon because you do have the 3 sports, and because so much of it is the bike, right? And the run is a big piece, but if you're just focusing on running and somebody's coming to me and they're like, I have an Achilles issue or I have a knee issue, like I'm more apt to be like, hey, I don't really think you should be doing the, maybe we should focus on recovering and making sure that you're healthy before you start training, because there's a significant risk when that's all they're doing is, to injuring themselves even worse. And so, if they're really determined, then you kind of have to almost pull in other things, right? It's almost like, okay, well, are you willing to do some work on a bike? Like, can you get on and ride? Can you do elliptical? Like, you have to pull in more of the cross training for a runner who's maybe in that situation versus, like doing the other. When you have three disciplines, you can rely on the bike, or in my case, it'd be like focusing on the bike and then, okay, I'm really going to focus on my swim because that is my weakest link for sure. And then I can really have that opportunity to maybe focus on something and know that maybe my run isn't going to go as well as I want, but I've been a runner for a while, so it will go okay. I can do run walk. I would know I would have confidence I could finish. I think that's the nice thing about triathlon is you have more you can pull. It's a
Yeah.
multidisciplinary event, so you can kind of get away with that versus running only. You really have to change your expectations if you're wanting to do a half marathon and and you have some sort of physical limitation or injury, because you do have a high risk if that's all you're doing of injuring yourself even more. So I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts around like that, triathlon versus like a single sport. While you're chatting, I'm going to run and get I'm going to plug my computer in. I forgot to get
Yeah.
my chargers.
So
Hold on.
yeah,
Yeah.
the other method that you can use to manage the training volume is to do split runs instead of, let's say you're going to be doing 6 run sessions a week. So you're running 6 days a week. Seventh day is either a cross training day, or if you really want, you can take that rest day. Um, you're only doing 6 sections. So you take that whole weekly volume and you're allocating it across 6 runs, and each run has a different purpose and a different structure to it in terms of also duration. So what one method that you can use is, instead of doing one long run, so let's say that you have like an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minute long run on the books to do, you could just say, hey, we're going to have 2 sessions that day. We're going to do a morning run, which may be a little bit of a higher intensity run, maybe do some cruising intervals, some tempo efforts that are in there. And then let's say if you have an hour and 45 minutes, that's your total run volume for the day. You can say, I'm going to do an hour and 15, or just do an hour and say that's your quality session, and then come back in the evening after you've recovered and do the balance of the work and make it kind of like a zone 2 effort. Your body still gets the cumulative effect of the fatigue and the training. Do you know what it's like to be on your feet for an hour and 45 minutes? No. So that is one piece that you are missing. But I would argue that if you're having a hard time recovering from hour and 45-minute run, what does it matter? What does it matter that what it feels like to be on your feet for an hour and 45 minutes if you can't recover from it, and then the next day's workouts are shot or a lower quality? I'd much rather you say, okay, we're just going to do a nice quality hour run, and then we're going to do a zone 3 30-minute or 45-minute in the evening. You have that whole day to kind of like recover from it, and then you'll be able to run with better form. That's that second block, which you would not be getting if you ran the whole workout in one session. So it kind of ensures that you can run with better form, that you can recover from efforts, and whatever limitation that you have is not being as stressed. So for instance, when I started getting back to running after my last race, my Achilles were just crazy hot. It didn't matter what I was doing, because like soon as I would start, I could feel them like flare right back up. And so I said, well, I need to figure out how long I can run before this happens. And so when I built the plan for that week, I was like, all right, in my mind, I want to say that I should be able to easily do 30 minutes, because I had been doing that kind of volume with no problem weeks and weeks before as I was training for the race. But then I gave myself 2 30-minute runs that week, so a total of 60 minutes of run volume. I found that my feet were pretty hot right around the 20-minute mark. And so one of the things that I work with my athletes a lot, and one of the things that I do a lot, is I try and emphasize body awareness over anything else. I don't care what your pace is. I don't care what your RPE is. None of that stuff matters. I want you really in tune with how your body feels at any given moment, because that stuff is valuable on race day. Technology fails, and it fails at the most inopportune times. So if you're chained to some kind of electrical device that tells you what kind of effort you're putting in, and that device doesn't work, now you're on the race course and you're left to the voices in your head to try and tell you what effort you should be running in or executing. So I really like this body awareness. When I work with swimmers, I want to say, well, where do you feel the muscles engaging? Because then that's going to tell you where you have holes in your strokes. So if you feel a lot of pressure in like the front of the shoulders, or, in the top of the shoulders, then I say, well, maybe what it seems to be is if you're feeling all that pressure there, then you don't have very good lat engagement. So you're not like reaching forward, and you're not driving with the hip and getting that early vertical forearm and really stretching it out and getting that lat to stretch and engage and pull back. So it's relying on the shoulders more. So that tells me like what kind of drills that we need to do to reinforce that. But if you don't have body awareness, you're left to kind of just say, well, I'm just going to try this and it didn't work, I'm going to try that. But if we don't always have time to just kind of like trial and error. So we really have to kind of like,
injured, right? When you
we have to
when
like
you're not
get down to
aware.
business.
Yeah, when you're
So
like, because it's you have to kind of know when is this, like, am I pushing this just a little bit? It kind of is a little, like with me over the weekend trail running, it was like I had this little hamstring thing, and I stretched it. I had to stop and stretch it a few times. It's kind of knowing when can I run through this. Like, I know this is a little bit. Maybe I did some deadlifts the other day. I'm a little bit fatigued from that. There's a little bit of soreness. Knowing what I can run through and having that awareness, like something's happening. So I'm going to try to do some things to kind of mitigate this in my run, like stretching or maybe just a few little active movements that might help it. But it's knowing that versus when do okay, well, what point is this getting to the point where I need to stop? You know what I mean? And I think
yeah,
I've had so many years of running, I kind of know my body well, but it's that awareness of there's this little something, and sometimes it's hard to know. Things can happen very quickly, and injuries can sometimes happen very quickly, even when even when we're not feeling something, and then all of a sudden you have something like a stress fracture. But it's like very, much of the time, it's just that awareness. Like, okay, you're checking in a little bit with your body as you're going, and is this too much? Should I when would I stop, and knowing that piece is part of that. And if you're so, I think, like you're saying, when you're so like into technology, like you're like not thinking about that, or you're so aware of your heart rate or something like that, or what your watch is telling you, then maybe you're not paying attention to actually what's physically happening to you or how you're feeling. And I think that's a really big problem. So I think part of this is knowing that, like you said, like, what is your limitation? Like, at what point is that little Achilles, like, feeling in the Achilles, like, maybe starting to run too hot or starting to become more of a problem, or knee, if your knee is, you're starting to feel the knee a little more than you normally do, okay, maybe this is the time you need to stop. And knowing that, and then, and like you're saying, like, okay, that might be the farthest you can go, at least this point, and working around that a little bit. I think that's a good, especially for an injury that maybe is kind of chronic, not like, one that, you're doing everything else appropriately. You're, doing all the rehab, you're doing everything you need to do to kind of keep it. And some people just have those sort of chronic injuries that they've tried everything with and they still want to participate. And I think this is kind of what we're gearing this towards a little bit, is those individuals. I never
yeah,
want to recommend somebody train through injury, but
I am the poster child of bad genetics. So, it's just, it doesn't matter. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars with my PTs and my chiropractors and all those guys. I should have my own wing in their office that's just dedicated, and I have my like, little name on the placard because I've spent so much money and time there. But
yeah, so
I still want to participate.
Actively,
I'm not willing to give up.
I
So
think the
yeah.
point here is that you're, like, doing all the things on the side to make sure you're staying as healthy as you can. You're like, you're not just trying to push through an injury, because you're just grit and determination, but you've kind of had this ongoing injury and you worked with several professionals and people to try to kind of do what you can to either mitigate it or, make it and recover with it as best you can. So I think that's another thing we need to mention here is like if you're having these limitations, like you do need to, working with a coach, and then maybe you do need to seek professional help from somebody who can maybe help give you exercises or I don't know, like massage can be really helpful. There's so many things that can help outside, and I know that does take up money and time, but you need to realize and recognize that just trying to train through it can kind of get you into trouble, and you need to be doing some of these things outside, whether it's even at home with the icing or Theragun or just those little recovery strategies, those things to help you be able to recover a little bit quicker so that you can get out and do another run the next day or later on in the day and break it up into 2 runs, and you're kind of doing what you need to do in between those times to be able to recover so that you're not pushing too hard to the point where the injury becomes the much bigger problem. So I think that's important to mention because I don't think it's not like you're not doing things outside of your training to help with that injury. Like you're absolutely doing other things to kind of support your recovery and support, with the strength training and the Achilles and mobility and all of that outside of training to help support that and not get injured further, I guess.
Yeah. So what I did was when I back to the stories where I had 30-minute runs rather than doing two by 30-minute runs, I did 3 by 20-minute runs.
Mhm.
I knew that I could get the same 60 minutes worth of volume for the week, but I would push it right to the point where I thought that Achilles was going to be at its weakest, and then I would stop. And then, my next run wouldn't be for a few more days after that. So, but one of the things that I've been testing is I've still kept this same method. I've been slowly kind of like increasing the duration. So I increased my run volume this week by I think it's like 10% or so, which is fairly reasonable, and kind of see how my body reacts to it. But one of the things that I was doing during these short runs was rather than just running at kind of like a zone 2 effort that was just relaxed and kind of lazy a little bit, I found that was actually harder for me to execute. And I don't know if like my mind was just wandering or if running at the slower pace was kind of altering my stride a little bit. And so my feet really weren't hitting the ground like I really wanted them to. I was really focused on paying attention how my left foot in particular was hitting the ground. And I noticed that when I started to feel a little bit of heat in the heel, that I would allow myself to kind of like rock to the side a little bit. It was my body's just built-in defense mechanism to try and protect that corner of the heel. And so I was kind of landing on the outside of the foot and then just kind of rolling in, trying to protect it. And so I really had to fight that and just say, no, don't protect it. Just engage that big toe and make a clean strike onto the ground. And I found that the pain actually went away when I would focus on making that clean strike rather than allowing my body to try and protect the weakened spot of. So it was really kind of interesting to make this kind of discovery. It's just like, well, if I kind of fight against my body's protection mechanisms and run with what I know is good form, then I wonder if it will help it. And lo and behold, it did for quite a bit. And so I was really pleased with it. And so what I then started to do is rather than just kind of like staying at the same pace and just like knocking out like the 20-minute run just to check the box and say that I did it, I started executing a little bit of what I call like an execution strategy for the run. So for the 20 minutes, I would say, okay, I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes at a nice warm-up pace, and I always progress my warm-up paces. So I start at the lowest pace, and then I kind of like climb it up in intervals. And once I get to the end of the 5 minutes, I should be right at the door of my zone 2 range. And then what I did was I executed a progressive run. So I split the remaining 15 minutes up into 1 minute segments, and I would increase my pace every minute on the minute until I got to the end of the 5 minutes, and I would revert back to the starting point. And so, for instance, I would use a 5 point, I ran on the treadmill. So I set my treadmill at 5.1 miles per hour with an elevation of 0.5% gradient. Every minute on the minute, I would increase that pace. So I'd go 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. And then at the end of that 5 minute, I would go back to 5.1 and then start the climb again. And I found that not only was it engaging my mind, because I was really kind of like paying attention. Okay, how does the body feel at this effort? And now I'd increase the effort. Okay, how does it feel at this effort? So I would keep going until the point where I kind of felt like, wait a minute, this effort feels too much, but I can hold it for the minute because I know I'm going to get the break. And so I kind of found that guardrail. And I know that we've used this analogy before in one of the podcasts. Is I'm just kind of like, rather than staying in the middle of the road, I'm kind of zigzagging along the road trying to find the guardrails on how far I can push it until I reach the border. And so it's been an interesting kind of experiment. And I've learned a lot as a coach and as an athlete on some of these different strategies that we can use to still kind of get the volume in, still keep us healthy. But I had a lengthy conversation with my massage therapist and my PT about this. And I said, hey, this is what I've done. I didn't seek their permission to sign up this time. So I just went ahead and signed up and
You're
said,
like, this is what I'm doing. So
this is what I've done. So it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. So I told them that they were going to play a big role in my ability to get to race day healthy. And so I've been using a massage therapist that goes pretty deep. It's almost like Training Peaks loggable, on how deep and kind of like sore I am after the massage, but it works wonders. I mean, it's great. And so it's 90-minute massages. And then the PT that I asked her if she would just do the dry needling when I need it. And I know that the only reason that I bring this up is because I know that my body reacts really well to dry needling. It's worked really, really well for me. So I've had a couple of really big knots and restrictions in muscles. You go in and you poke a few needles into it, and then, you do the therapy, and you are really, really, really sore afterwards. But the more you kind of do it, the more that the muscle starts to relax and become more elastic. And that therapy has worked for me. And so not only am I executing workouts, but there is a very purposeful, structured recovery protocol that I know that I have to follow, because it doesn't matter, like I said before, it doesn't matter how much I train. If I train optimally or if I get all greens in Training Peaks, if I can't recover, then I can't execute on race day. And this is one aspect that I know that I personally have to do in order to get to race day healthy. And it's the recovery piece, and they play an important role. So
Yeah, I mean, it keeps you, it keeps that kind of injury, I think, a little bit from getting worse. And then it helps you recover quicker in other aspects as well. But I think that's a really critical piece here. So it's like if you are going to, like I mentioned, like train through something, maybe a nagging injury or something chronic like that, then you do need to be doing these other things, I think. Like you could try to get away with it, but not, just not doing that. I just don't think it's going to be as successful, because I think you'll end up hurting yourself more. But you mentioned something really important, I think, a couple of things. One is being able to pay attention to your biomechanics a little bit. And sometimes it might help to have somebody help you with this. So I've been to a PT where they've watched me run, and they've kind of outlined certain ways biomechanically that maybe one foot strike is a little bit different than the other. And I do have one leg that's chronically, I just have issues with. Like, it's my right leg. That's the one I had the hamstring thing during my run. Get like some not Achilles, but like in my arch. Sometimes I get weird pain there. I think it's just I'm imbalanced a little bit. And I have had somebody help me, and kind of like when I do focus more on when I'm actually paying attention to like how I'm running and making sure that I am hitting my foot correctly, like kind of through the big toe, like I'm not doing anything. I'm actually striding on both sides equally, because sometimes I think what's happening is I may be compensating for a past injury. I've had like a sprained ankle before. there is that stuff there that's eliminating you. And if you, over time, if you're not running correctly, it can kind of make something that's maybe minor into something worse. So if you're focusing on that and you can actually have that body awareness to, maybe you are doing runs where you're just focusing predominantly on that form and like how the foot is striking and making sure that you're just in tune with that. Yeah, it's hard because sometimes we love to go running and just let our minds wander. I mean, I love that about running, but there are times when I think it's really important to like focus a little more inward on your body and what's happening. And maybe if you need some help with that, like going somewhere where you can get like someone to analyze your biomechanics or your foot strike, maybe on a treadmill or outside, like a PT or something, can be really helpful so that you kind of know like this is maybe what I need to work on, and that might help the injury and also preventing further injuries. And then you mentioned that, and then I'm trying to think of what other piece there. I was like trying to remember, but now I think that's probably the biggest thing. Oh, and then you mentioned pace. And I do think something to keep in mind is like we actually have kind of an optimal pace. I've noticed that sometimes when I'm trying to slow down to be in zone 2, and some days my zone 2 is quite slow when I'm really needing to recover, because maybe I need to keep my heart rate down under 140 some days to try to keep it in zone 2. And I slow down I can feel it, like it is almost harder to
Mm-hmm.
run at that pace, and I can see that my form is declining. So sometimes, like, even though yes, I should probably run slower, like it's actually much more economic for me to be at a slightly faster pace because everything's deteriorating at that slower pace for me, like my form, and I see it and I feel it. So I might have to be like, okay, like maybe I need like this app or whatever is using technology, it's telling me I need to be at a slower pace, but I can't. Like this isn't going to be good for me because it's making my running a lot less efficient and economical. So now I'm going to kind of just push it a little faster because I know I just feel better at this pace. And so I think sometimes you also have to think about that and be paying attention to those different paces. And we tend to, when we're running much slower than we're used to, maybe our form is starting to go. And then sometimes also when we're running much faster, so we have to be
Yes.
kind of careful on those two ends of the spectrum because, really high rates of speed can cause injury, when we're doing speed work. And then also on the other end of the spectrum is when we're running really slow or slower than we're used to. So, just keeping that in mind too, like your pace and then your form. And those are all things that you want to be focusing on as you're running and kind of figuring that out for yourself. But I think you brought up two really good points that I just wanted to emphasize. Yeah. I don't know if you have any other
Yeah,
thoughts.
I'm in quite a few of these groups where, people are asking questions like, I want to learn how to run further. I want to increase my distance, and it never fails. Kind of like the first piece of advice that they give is like slow down, shorten your stride. And I think I understand the thought process and the methodology behind it. And I understand the whole 80-20 principle that was kind of like reinforced by Matt Fitzgerald. So I understand the logic. What I will say is that running slow will not make you a fast runner. And it will not necessarily make you a longer. And it's for the very reason that you brought up, is as we slow down to these slower paces, our stride is manipulated such that, it shortens the stride, and it makes you less economical to a certain extent. Each athlete is going to be different. Now, if you're running beyond your fitness and you want to run further, then yes, maybe that is a valid principle to use. Is like, okay, well, you're already, your intensity levels are greater than what you can sustain. So we have to get you to slow down, but we're not getting you to slow down so that you can run further. I want to get you to slow down so that you pay attention more, so that you are more aware of what it is that you're doing. You're focusing in. It's like, okay, well, how am I breathing? Are they really like short, like fast breaths, or could I take a really deep breath and be okay? I don't necessarily believe that you have to be able to talk the whole conversational pace. I have been doing this for a long time, and I've never been able to talk when running, ever. But I can run long
You can run.
distance
Yeah. You just
with no
talking.
problem.
Yeah.
But talking has always been a problem. So, but I can control my breath. And so these are the things that we really want to focus on. It's not that, well, if you want to run further, you got to slow down. No, well, we slow down because I want you to be more in tune with, okay, how are my feet hitting the ground? And does this stride feel awkward? And like, if I were to actually lengthen out my stride, would I feel more comfortable? Because the more comfortable the longer you can go. So if you're uncomfortable, you're not going to run as long, and therefore your distance isn't going to be as far, and you're defeating the purpose. You're not going to get what it is that you're after, and that's by running further, by slowing down. And so this is one of the things that I'm learning as a coach and as a longtime athlete myself. And it's stuff that I've taken for granted, throughout my, endurance athlete journey is, not really just paying attention. I run with headphones. I run with music. I love it. It's a big distraction. And, I've always kind of be the one, I've always wanted to be the guy that would just go out and just say, I want to run because I love the way it makes me feel. I've yet to really kind of, really kind of get there. I mean, I run, but, it's not that, oh, I love running.
It's not like
It's like,
I'm out there like,
yeah,
yeah,
I just want to
I'm like
say
that type. I'm like, I love
ran. So,
and I can go out
and
there and zone out, and it's
yes,
like I
yep.
can just run. I
And you
run
just kind of
without
like,
music sometimes.
yeah,
I
you
just
bury yourself into the music
in
and you
my
allow the
condo.
music to control
Yeah,
your
that's true.
effort rather than enjoying the music,
Yeah.
but controlling.
And you're in
You're the
tune with
one that's
your
in
effort.
control
Yeah.
of it. And that you're the one that's aware. How are my feet hitting the ground? Am I rocking through? Am I kind of hitting like a midfoot? Am I overstriding? And so I'm really kind of like putting the brakes and I'm slamming on my heel. What's my stride feel like? Are my feet barely coming off of the ground? So I have I have low foot clearance.
I mean, you could even have somebody video you running,
Yes.
and you
Yeah.
just have to do it and try not and okay, like they're videoing me, I'm not gonna try to make it look better. So like your normal
Yeah.
running
Don't alter
form,
it because
don't
somebody's
alter
recording
it.
it.
Just
Yeah.
yeah, just run. Because I've had that happen when I had my meniscus injury a couple of years ago. I had my husband actually film me for another reason, and then when I was looking at the video, I'm kind of like limping on this one side. There's like a weird. This is after I've recovered, but I've had this weird kind of like limp thing that was going on. And it wasn't really until, I mean, I kind of noticed it, but it wasn't, I saw it on the video and I'm like, yeah, that's weird because I don't really have this injury anymore. But it was just like my body, when you have an injury or you've had an injury, it's like those survival, it's like does things to
Yeah.
kind of like,
Absolutely.
almost subconsciously. And so seeing that made me realize, oh, like this isn't good. Like I can't it looks like I'm limping, like I have an injury, but the injury is done and I'm not having pain anymore. So then I was able to kind of alter and really pay attention to what was I was doing and try to mitigate that limping. And it's definitely much better, but it's really interesting to have that video. And it wasn't even intentional. It was like, take a video of me running up this hill. And he did. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, does it look like I'm limping? And he's like, yeah, like, I don't know. I kind of noticed that. I'm like, why don't you say something? Why do you say, like, it looks like you're limping? But I saw it on the video, so it's just I think just, like, that body awareness that yeah, it's nice to be able to run. I do like to be able to run with, like, a podcast or something and just be able to, like, zone out, but I do think you need to also even when you're doing that, take some time during that run to check in with yourself. How are you feeling? How is your stride? Are you starting to shorten your stride a little towards the end of a long run? Is there things that are changing biomechanically, like maybe you're noticing you are striking a little more with your heels and making those corrections as you're going and just spending a minute every so often to check in on your body and your form and how you're feeling and your pace. And what do you think? You know, that's why it's I think important not to just do runs at zone 2 like the specific pace all of the time because it's nice to be able to sort of do some faster paces or different paces and sort of see how you feel at different paces too. Like you may notice, hey, when I kind of pick it up a little bit or I at this pace I'm actually am like not running short my stride length is lengthening a little bit. I feel more efficient at this pace even though maybe it puts my heart rate a little higher than I want it to be. I think there's value in that and maybe, knowing like, oh, this is kind of where I feel good, maybe doing a little more of your training there, even though you're not doing this like specific zone 2, all of the time. I just think I mean, maybe we'll talk. We are planning to do a whole thing on zone 2 training, so maybe we'll bring this in. But I think that body awareness. I was actually also curious, Justin, just thinking about it. Like, so if you have somebody who is wanting to do like a half marathon, but they're not able to because of an injury or just some physical limitation, not because of time, would you ever think it would be helpful to do some sort of, okay, you're going to run, and then I want you to hop on like the elliptical or the bike or something that doesn't cause pain. So we're going to do just to get that endurance piece, like, because maybe you can't do a 16-mile run for your half marathon in preparation. And maybe all you can get to is like 8 or 9 before you're like, this is causing me problem. But we want to kind of get some of that endurance adaptation. Like, is there a time you recommend, like, let's say, okay, you're going to do the run, and then I want you to get on the elliptical and like finish out another hour on the elliptical, or get on the bike and just spin it out on, maybe zone 2 on a indoor trainer or a bike ride or something. I mean, do you think there's value to that for somebody who is just running, not necessarily trying to do a triathlon, but just like a runner wanting to make it to a half marathon, for instance?
Yeah, what I've found is one of the things that I implement is I'll have them do their run session up to their limit. So we got to find out like how long they can kind of like go with good form and feel fairly comfortable. Not, I guess comfortable is kind of a bad word, because I do want to stress you, but I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by the effort. Just trying to get you right to that guardrail to where you kind of feel like, okay, I don't know if I can sustain this with good form. Once we reach that point, then we know that's where the guardrail is. And so if we need to do an hour and a half run, but you can only run for an hour with good form, absolutely. I'd have you run for the hour at a fairly decent intensity and then do the balance of, the remaining 30 minutes on an elliptical. The reason that I would choose an elliptical for a runner is because it's the one machine that closely resembles a run stride. Putting them on a bike would, unless they are a triathlete, but they're just training for a half marathon, then I would maybe put them on a bike. The bike and the run, they use both the same cardiovascular engine, but riding a lot is not going to make you a good runner, But, it's a different muscle engagement. It's non-impact, but unless you like riding the bike and you have some use for it, it doesn't really
It might help with the
seem
cardiovascular
reasonable.
fitness,
Yeah,
but yeah,
that to
it's
me
not
that's the
specific
only
enough.
benefit
Yeah,
from it. That's
yeah.
why I would kind of focus on the elliptical. I'm the kind of coach where I'm going to give you a structured workout on the elliptical. So there's a purpose that we're on here. We're not
You're not
on
just
here
spinning
just to
out on
get.
it like,
We're not just getting there just to do the 30 minutes
right.
of aerobic capacity. No, we are actually following a structure. So one of the things that I do is I put the elliptical on some kind of interval setting to where the ramp will change or the resistance will change on the machine in whatever predefined interval that they have. And I can adjust that up or down. And then I say, if we're doing 30 minutes on the elliptical, we're going to do 5-minute blocks. And so for 5 minutes, I want you to have your stride is going forward as if you were running. All right. And then once the 5 minutes is up, we stop and we reverse the stride. So it's like you're going backwards. The reason that I do that is because I want different muscle engagement. So, you'll find that when you're going backwards, you're going to have a lot more, you're going to have a really good like glute engagement, which I find most runners are pretty weak in, which is why many of them start to experience knee pain. And it's not necessarily some kind of like structural issue with the knee. It's just that the glute is not firing the way that it should. And so then the hamstring has to kick in. And so things are getting overworked. And so that's where the pain typically will present itself, is kind of in the knee. So I want to get us on a machine that removes the impact. You're still going to have like that dorsiflexion of the foot. So if you have an Achilles issue and you get on the elliptical, that elliptical may not be the best thing for you, because it's the flexion of the foot is what's going to put stress on the Achilles. It's not the impact that is stressing it out. It's the stretch of the Achilles. And so, it might be where, we keep the cross ramp down, so you don't have very much elevation on the elliptical, but we increase the resistance of it. So you're really not getting that pretty pronounced foot flexion as if you're like running up a hill.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
I'll
think
do
that's
that, and they'll just go back and forth every 5 minutes. It helps break up the monotony of being on an elliptical, because many athletes were like, that is so incredibly boring. It's the elliptical. But if I give them something that engages them and say, okay, well, I can do this for 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes, you're doing a different kind of movement, so it breaks it up, and we just keep rotating back and forth. You're getting the different muscle engagement. B, you're more entertained. And so, I mean, we have to be realistic. As coaches, our job is to make our athletes prepared for the task that they have at hand. Many athletes want to be entertained by their workouts. I'm sorry to say that, it's really not my job to entertain you,
right.
but I do want to give you workouts that have value,
Purpose.
have a purpose, and keep you engaged so that you enjoy them. They may not be easy, but I want you to find joy in the workout, because if you don't find joy in it, it's going to be a drag.
Right.
And I'm not there to make you do your workout. So if you find it enough of a drag, then you're more likely to skip it. And then, that just opens up a
Yeah.
whole nother can of
Well, then
worms.
that's a purpose. Yeah, I think that's a good answer to that question, because I do think, there is a time where maybe you can add in, something to kind of supplement the running a little bit, but there might be certain things that are better than others in terms of what you're doing for that sort of additional work. I'm also
One of the
thinking
things
like,
that
oh,
there's another one that I like to do, unless, because unfortunately many runners are bad swimmers. And so one of the
swim
things is
pool
I
swimming.
have I have a workout that is just kick drills. And all you do is you just put on a pair of fins and you have a kickboard. And I give this for runners to do different kick sets.
Right,
A,
yeah.
because there's no stress on the body and it's really, really good muscle engagement. So I will sit down with them and I'll tell them, okay, this is how we kick. This is how we're supposed to kick, because we're not like just going to go in and just, kick haphazardly. I want you to kick with good form so that the right muscles are engaged at the right time. And so you'll see as you change your position in the water, you'll feel different muscles engage. And so I find that that's really beneficial for runners if, we want to have like a cross training day or something like that, and they don't mind getting in the water and they have access to a pool. That's another really great option
Mhm. Yeah, or
to,
they
to
could
build
do
in some variety.
aqua jogging. I know that's like most runners despise it. I know I don't like it, but it is a good cross training tool. But I suppose if you had the ability to do part of your run, like running, and then get in the pool and do like the rest of it aqua jogging, like obviously you have to do it. It's hard. It's not actually that easy to do when you're doing it right, because it's mimicking the run, but you just don't have any of that impact. And you're against the resistance of the water. So that's a good option. Obviously, it's boring, very boring. So if you have like, something you can listen to that, some water resistant headphones or earbuds or something, like that's probably going to be the way to go, because there isn't really a lot you can do to make that particularly fun. And that might be another option that's pretty close to running. Yeah, I mean, there aren't, those are probably the big ones I can think of that in terms of injury, that you would want to do. I think elliptical aqua jog, kicking, something like that could mimic running or help strengthen a little bit too, maybe.
It depends on where we are in the season too. I mean,
Mhm.
if you're in the middle of a training plan for a race, then we want to try things that mimic
Yeah,
that
true.
mimic the run stride. But if we're kind of like off season, but we're dealing with like a chronic injury, then that's a little bit different.
Different. That's
We
yeah,
might
we're
be
kind
able
of
to say,
specifically, I
let's
think,
go ahead.
talking
Yeah,
more
let's do
about
the run. And if
yeah.
you have access to a row machine, or if you want to do, on the bike, or you want to do some of these other movements, that's perfectly fine and reasonable, but there's a time and place for it. And that's typically kind of like the off season when you're not like actively training for a particular race or event.
Yeah, I think we're kind of talking more about like if you have the event plan, but that's true. I think putting context to that, like this is really in the sense that you have a race coming up. Like, what are you going to do to try to mimic the running the most? I do have, unfortunately, got kind of a hard stop here at like a couple minutes at 2. But I think we captured a lot of, especially, I mean, I don't know if we talked a lot about like the time constraint issue. I mean, maybe that's something we could almost discuss in like a coach's corner thing as well, because I know that's something I struggle with. So that could almost be a separate thing that we talk about, just in that, and some of the things I've struggled with and some of the things I do with my trying to fit in, especially with my son and time. And so maybe we can like dive into that on one of our coaches' corners soon. Um, I mean, I think we really covered a lot of important things to keep in mind and some ideas for training sort of through an injury, or trying to get to race day when you have some limitations. Is there anything else like you wanna make sure we touch on
No,
before?
not in terms of the content. I know that we're kind of winding this thing down a little bit,
Yeah.
and so what I do want to say is I want to thank everybody initially for listening to the podcast and for your support of the podcast. We love doing this. We don't have sponsors. We don't make any money off of this. If anything, it costs us, but we do it because we love just kind of getting on and just talking about a sport that has been part of both of our lives for a really, really long time. And I know that we both have a passion for helping others achieve things that they never thought possible. So one of the things that I would really like to ask is that if you find this podcast helpful and informative and you really want to support the podcast, go out to whatever platform you're listening on, whether you're using Spotify or iTunes or what have you, Amazon, and leave us a review. I did notice that we actually got 2 5-star reviews on iTunes. There were no comments, but we'll take the 5 stars. But
Thank
you
you.
give us however many stars that
But
you
if you
want to
have a
give us, however
comment,
much
like,
you think
feel
that
free
we're
to leave a
worth.
comment if you have anything to
Absolutely.
say.
It'd be nice to have a couple comments just to get some context to it. But if you leave whatever review that you think is worthy of the effort, and we appreciate your continued support over the podcast. And don't forget, we also have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. It's a private group on Facebook. All you have to do is just search for the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group and answer one simple question. We'll let you right on in. We're going to be trying to push out some additional content into this group, so this will be the place that you will find some of this extra stuff. Ask questions to us and to other members, suggest topics that you would like for us to cover. It's a really great area for you to use to communicate with us. So we thank you again so much for the time that you spend listening to us. But that's it. That's it for me. I'm good.
That's it, yeah. We'll cover some more of that time constraint topic a little bit later, but yeah, I think we covered a lot, especially for those who are dealing with injury or, other limitations like that. So I think this was good. I feel good about it. Yeah. Well, it's
Awesome.
good to see
All
you,
right,
Justin.
this was episode was this 13 or 12? I
13.
can't remember now. 13. This was episode 13 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie, and we look forward to talking with you again. See you later, Katie.
See ya. Bye.
Listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Kate an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.